The crystalline dome stretched overhead like a frozen galaxy, its surface reflecting the bioluminescent forms of 700 alien species. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood at the center of the accused platform, a circular disk that hovered 300 meters above the chamber floor. Below him, darkness descended into depths he could not see. Around him, tier upon tier of alien delegates watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to undisguised hostility. Marcus kept his breathing steady. The simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps felt inadequate in this place where some delegates wore armor that could withstand stellar radiation, while others existed as clouds of sentient gas contained in force fields. He had no weapons, no visible technology beyond the translation implant embedded behind his ear. To the assembled council he must have looked fragile, almost pathetically vulnerable. High Arbiter Velkoth materialized at the head of the chamber. The being appeared as pure energy trapped within a lattice of geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. Its voice bypassed Marcus's ears entirely, speaking directly into his mind through the neural implant. The human delegation stands accused of war crimes unprecedented in galactic history. The complete annihilation of the Kresh Dominion. 23 colony worlds, 47 billion souls, vanished within 18 standard cycles. A holographic display materialized around Marcus, showing worlds that had once teemed with life now silent and empty. Cities stood intact but abandoned. Orbital stations drifted without power. Fleets of warships floated in the void, their crews dead at their stations with no visible damage to the vessels themselves. Marcus had seen these images before. Earth's intelligence services had documented every phase of what happened to the Kresh, but seeing them projected here, in front of 700 species who now questioned whether humanity deserved to exist, made his stomach tighten. The Kresh were a recognized power, Velkoth continued. They possessed fourth-generation stellar manipulation technology. Their fleet numbered over 12,000 warships. According to every military simulation conducted by this council, the Kresh should have reduced Earth to molten slag within 3 solar rotations of their invasion. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Marcus noticed the Threxian delegates leaning forward, their compound eyes gleaming. The Threxians had territorial disputes with humanity along the Orion Arm. They wanted to know what happened to the Kresh, because they wanted to know if it could happen to them. Instead, Velkoth's energy lattice flared brighter. The Kresh are gone. Not defeated. Not subjugated, gone. Their homeworld is an empty husk. Their colonies are silent. Their fleets were found drifting in deep space, crews dead at their stations, no visible damage to the vessels themselves. Ambassador Webb explained how a species that achieved interstellar travel only 70 years ago accomplished what this council considers impossible. Marcus allowed himself a slight smile. He had been waiting for this moment since Earth received the summons to appear before the Galactic Council. Every word of his response had been carefully prepared, reviewed by Earth's best strategic analysts, and approved by the Secretary-General herself. High Arbiter. The Kresh attacked Earth without provocation. They broadcast their intentions clearly. They intended to harvest our planet for raw materials and process our population into protein supplements for their industrial complexes. Under Article 7 of the Galactic Concordat, we exercised our right to self-defense. Self-defense? The voice came from Counselor Thrain, representing the Viridian Collective. The insectoid alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign Marcus had learned indicated extreme agitation. You call this self-defense? You eradicated an entire civilization. You rendered a species extinct. That transcends self-defense into genocide. We gave them multiple opportunities to withdraw, Marcus replied, keeping his voice calm and steady. 3 separate communications offering ceasefire terms. They refused each one. They escalated their attacks. They explicitly stated their intention to exterminate every human being on Earth. We responded proportionally to the threat they presented. Proportionally? Thrain's translator struggled to contain the volume. You call extinction proportional? Marcus turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates across the ascending tiers. He needed them to see him as a person, not just a representative of a species they feared. Counselor Thrain, humanity learned a harsh lesson in our ancient history. When you fight a war, you fight to win, not to wound, not to negotiate from weakness. To win, the Kresh wanted to exterminate us. They gave us no choice. We simply accomplished our objective first and more efficiently. Then you admit to genocide, Velkoth stated. I admit to victory, Marcus corrected. I admit to ensuring that the species that attacked us with genocidal intent would never threaten us again. I admit to protecting the 7 billion human beings living on Earth who had done nothing to provoke this attack, except exist in a system the Kresh wanted to exploit. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in hundreds of languages, their translation implants struggling to keep pace with the overlapping voices. Some species demanded Earth's immediate quarantine, the deployment of council fleets to blockade human space. Others called for preemptive strikes against Earth itself, arguing that a species capable of such destruction could not be allowed to exist. A few species, Marcus noted carefully, remained silent, watching the proceedings with calculating interest rather than fear or outrage. Velkoth restored order with a pulse of electromagnetic energy that caused every delegate's implant to momentarily go numb. The sensation was unpleasant, like static electricity across Marcus's brain. When sound returned, the chamber was silent. The Council has reviewed the evidence over the past 30 solar cycles, Velkoth announced. We have examined every available data point regarding the conflict between Earth and the Kresh Dominion. The question before us today is not whether humanity committed these acts. The evidence is conclusive. The question is whether such acts constitute a threat to galactic stability that requires immediate and decisive action. Marcus felt his pulse quicken despite his training. This was the moment Earth's intelligence services had predicted. The Council wasn't interested in justice or moral judgment. They were deciding whether humanity needed to be eliminated before it became too powerful to control. I request the right to present evidence, Marcus said clearly. You stand accused? Not on trial, Velkoth replied. The Council does not require your testimony to reach a determination. Then I invoke Treaty Protocol Omega. Marcus spoke the words carefully, knowing they would change everything. As a newly contacted species achieving interstellar capability within the past century, Earth has the right to demonstrate our culture, capabilities, and intentions before any judgment affecting our continued existence is rendered. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the ambient sounds of alien respiratory systems seemed to pause. Treaty Protocol Omega was ancient, established during the Council's founding nearly 10,000 years ago. It existed because once, early in the Council's history, a species had been judged hostile and preemptively exterminated. Later investigation revealed they had been defending themselves against an aggressor the Council had failed to identify. The protocol was the Council's admission of past error. A safeguard against repeating that mistake. It was also rarely invoked because most species who might need it were destroyed before they learned it existed, Velkoth says. Energy lattice pulsed through several configurations that Marcus's implant translated as surprise and reluctant acknowledgement. The protocol is valid. You will have 1 solar cycle to present your case. But understand, Ambassador Webb, this Council has already witnessed what humanity is capable of destroying. You will need to provide extraordinary justification for actions we currently consider crimes against all sentient life. Marcus bowed his head slightly, showing respect without submission. Thank you, High Arbiter. I believe when the Council understands how humanity fights, and more importantly, why we fight the way we do, you will realize that the Kresh's fate was not cruelty or excessive force. It was mercy. The chamber erupted again, but Marcus caught the expressions of several senior delegates before the noise overwhelmed his senses. Fear. They were afraid of what he might reveal. And that fear, Marcus knew, was the only reason Earth still existed. The Council could have deployed their fleets weeks ago. They could have done to Earth what Earth did to the Kresh, but they were afraid. Afraid that humanity had capabilities they didn't understand? afraid that attacking Earth might trigger consequences they couldn't predict. Afraid that whatever allowed humans to erase the crash might erase them too. As the platform began descending, carrying Marcus back to the delegation chambers far below, he allowed himself to relax slightly. The game had begun. Earth had bought itself time to make its case. And humanity had not survived 10,000 years of warfare against itself by entering games it couldn't win. The real question wasn't whether the Council would accept Earth's justification. The real question was whether Marcus could convince them that making an enemy of humanity was more dangerous than accepting humans as equals. He had one solar cycle to change 700 species' perception of what humans were capable of and what they were willing to do. One cycle to transform humanity from terrifying threat into necessary ally. One cycle to ensure that Earth's children had a future among the stars. The platform settled into its dock. Marcus stepped off, his legs steady despite 3 hours of standing under the scrutiny of the galaxy's most powerful beings. Guards escorted him through corridors of impossible architecture toward the sealed section where Earth's delegation waited. Behind him, in the Great Chamber, 700 species debated humanity's fate. Ahead of him, his team would be analyzing every micro-expression, every physiological response they had detected in the Council delegates. Earth's survival might depend on understanding which species could be reasoned with, and which had already decided humans needed to die. Marcus smiled grimly as the security doors sealed behind him. The Kresh had made the mistake of thinking humans were primitives who would surrender when faced with superior force. The Council was making a different mistake. They thought this was about explaining or justifying what happened to the Kresh. It wasn't. This was about making the Council understand that the Kresh weren't unique, that what happened to them could happen to anyone, and that humanity's willingness to erase enemies completely made cooperation the only rational choice. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin teaching the galaxy what it meant to make an enemy of Earth, and by the time he finished, they would understand why the Kresh disappeared so completely, because humanity didn't fight wars to win battles. They fought wars to ensure the enemy could never threaten them again. The human delegation quarters occupied a sealed section of the Council station, separated from the main diplomatic sectors by 3 security checkpoints and constant surveillance. As Marcus entered, he found his team already assembled around a holographic display showing real-time analysis of the Council chamber proceedings. Dr. Eliza Grant looked up from her data terminal. The xenanthropologist had spent 20 years studying alien psychology, and her insights had been crucial in preparing Earth's defense strategy. 47 species showed physiological stress responses during your testimony. Elevated core temperatures, increased pheromone production, accelerated neural activity. They're terrified. Fear is rational when you don't understand your opponent, Marcus replied, pouring himself water from the dispenser. His hands were steady, but 3 hours of standing under hostile scrutiny had left him drained. What's our intelligence situation? Commander David Ortiz pulled up a series of diplomatic intercepts. The security chief had connections throughout Earth's intelligence network, providing access to communications most ambassadors never saw. 16 species contacted their home governments, requesting military readiness assessments within minutes of the session ending. The Threxians are mobilizing their border fleets. 3 minor species have petitioned for immediate admission to mutual defense pacts with larger powers. They think we're coming for them, Eliza observed. They should, Marcus said quietly, because they still don't understand what the Kresh did wrong. Tomorrow we start the real education. The display shifted to show footage from 4 years earlier. A Kresh battle fleet emerged from faster-than-light transit at the edge of Earth's solar system. The ships were massive, designed to inspire terror as much as fight battles. They looked like armored crescents, each one capable of reducing a planet to ash. Marcus had watched this recording hundreds of times, but it never failed to make his chest tighten. The Kresh had broadcast their intention with brutal clarity. Humanity was classified as a pre-council primitive species with no rights under galactic law. Earth possessed resources the Kresh required for their industrial expansion. Resistance would be met with total annihilation of the human population. They had given Earth 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Play our response. Marcus instructed. The hologram shifted to show Secretary General Amanda Price delivering Earth's reply from the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. Marcus remembered writing part of that speech, remembered the debates about whether they should try to negotiate or show strength. To the Kresh Dominion. Your demands are rejected. Leave our system immediately or face the consequences. 23 words. The Kresh had found it amusing enough to broadcast across their empire. A primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel, threatening a power that had conquered 12 sectors of space. They had laughed, then they had begun their invasion. Pull up the operational timeline, Marcus said. The hologram displayed a tactical map of what the Kresh called a war in what historians would later describe as humanity's most desperate gamble. By conventional measures, it was the most one-sided conflict in galactic history. Day 1. The Kresh fleet established orbital dominance over Earth within hours. Human defense platforms were destroyed. Every ship Earth launched was systematically eliminated. Planetary bombardment began on major population centers. Casualties: 400 million humans dead. Day 2. Kresh ground forces landed on 6 continents. Human military resistance was fierce but completely futile against their superior technology and numbers. Casualties: 200 million humans dead. Day 3. Earth's governments issued formal surrender. The Kresh refused, stating that humanity's defiance required an example be made for other species who might consider resistance. The bombardment intensified. Casualties: 300 million humans dead. Day 4. Something changed. Marcus watched as the timeline displayed what happened next. Kresh commanders reported minor equipment failures across their fleet. Nothing critical at first. Weapon systems momentarily offline. Navigation computers displaying incorrect coordinates. Communication arrays experiencing interference. Command assumed stress-related errors or the harsh environment of human space. Day 5. The glitches intensified. Kresh crew members began reporting psychological symptoms. Paranoia, insomnia, visual hallucinations of humans infiltrating their ships. Medical officers attributed it to combat stress from subjugating a resistant population. Day 6. 3 Kresh warships collided during routine formation flight. Investigation revealed navigation crews were operating under false sensor data, each ship receiving different position information. 2,000 Kresh casualties. Command ordered a full systems diagnostic across the fleet. Day 7. Panic spread through the Kresh military. Equipment failures became catastrophic. Life support systems fluctuated randomly. Weapons fired without authorization. A battlecruiser's reactor containment failed during routine operation, destroying the ship and 6 escort vessels in the resulting explosion. 40,000 Kresh dead. Day 8. The Kresh High Command ordered full retreat. They would return with additional forces to sterilize Earth completely, but first they needed to understand what was destroying their fleet. The faster-than-light drives activated. Every ship ended up in a different random location across the galaxy. Some materialized inside stellar coronas. Others appeared inside asteroid fields. Most simply vanished, their quantum signatures indicating dimensional dispersal that shouldn't be possible. Day 9 through 12. Every Kresh military installation in human-occupied space experienced simultaneous catastrophic failures. Orbital bases lost atmosphere. Planetary installations had their defense systems turn on them. Weapon stockpiles detonated. The Kresh attributed everything to human sabotage and vowed revenge. Day 30. The Kresh homeworld's planetary defense network activated without authorization. It targeted population centers. In 4 hours, 3 billion Kresh died before engineers could manually shut down the systems. Day 14. Kresh colonies began falling silent. No distress calls. No explanations. Investigative teams from neutral species discovered entire populations dead, infrastructure completely intact. No signs of conventional attack. Day 15, the crash. Dominion's central government issued a galaxy-wide emergency broadcast. They claimed humanity deployed a weapon of unprecedented sophistication that could manipulate technology and biology across interstellar distances. They demanded Galactic Council intervention. Day 16, the Council dispatched observer vessels. They found exactly what the crash described. Worlds full of corpses. Technology mysteriously failing. Ships drifting with dead crews. Day 17, the last surviving crash fleet, comprising the Dominion's elite guard, launched a final desperate assault on Earth. Supreme Commander Valkresh himself led them, prepared to suicide crash their vessels into human cities if necessary. Day 18, the elite guard fleet arrived at Earth. Every ship, every crew member was found dead at their stations. No damage to the vessels. No signs of attack. Just silence. The hologram faded. Eliza broke the silence first. The Council thinks we deployed some kind of quantum-level superweapon. Technology that can manipulate electronics and biology simultaneously across interstellar distances. Do we have such a weapon? Marcus asked, though he knew the answer. Of course not, Eliza replied. That's not how we won? Marcus smiled grimly. Tomorrow, we begin explaining exactly how we won. And when we're done, the Council will understand why they should be grateful we chose the crash as our demonstration. Demonstration? Ortiz looked confused. Epting humans as equals. He had one solar cycle to change 700 species' perception of what humans were capable of, and what they were willing to do. One cycle to transform humanity from terrifying threat into necessary ally. One cycle to ensure that Earth's children had a future among the stars. The platform settled into its dock. Marcus stepped off, his legs steady despite 3 hours of standing under the scrutiny of the galaxy's most powerful beings. Guards escorted him through corridors of impossible architecture toward the sealed section where Earth's delegation waited. Behind him, in the Great Chamber, 700 species debated humanity's fate. Ahead of him, his team would be analyzing every micro-expression, every physiological response they had detected in the Council delegates. Earth's survival might depend on understanding which species could be reasoned with, and which had already decided humans needed to die. Marcus smiled grimly as the security doors sealed behind him. The Kresh had made the mistake of thinking humans were primitives who would surrender when faced with superior force. The Council was making a different mistake. They thought this was about explaining or justifying what happened to the Kresh. It wasn't. This was about making the Council understand that the Kresh weren't unique, that what happened to them could happen to anyone, and that humanity's willingness to erase enemies completely made cooperation the only rational choice. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin teaching the galaxy what it meant to make an enemy of Earth, and by the time he finished, they would understand why the Kresh disappeared so completely, because humanity didn't fight wars to win battles. They fought wars to ensure the enemy could never threaten them again. The human delegation quarters occupied a sealed section of the Council station, separated from the main diplomatic sectors by 3 security checkpoints and constant surveillance. As Marcus entered, he found his team already assembled around a holographic display showing real-time analysis of the Council chamber proceedings. Dr. Eliza Grant looked up from her data terminal. The xenanthropologist had spent 20 years studying alien psychology, and her insights had been crucial in preparing Earth's defense strategy. 47 species showed physiological stress responses during your testimony. Elevated core temperatures, increased pheromone production, accelerated neural activity. They're terrified. Fear is rational when you don't understand your opponent, Marcus replied, pouring himself water from the dispenser. His hands were steady, but 3 hours of standing under hostile scrutiny had left him drained. What's our intelligence situation? Commander David Ortiz pulled up a series of diplomatic intercepts. The security chief had connections throughout Earth's intelligence network, providing access to communications most ambassadors never saw. 16 species contacted their home governments, requesting military readiness assessments within minutes of the session ending. The Threxians are mobilizing their border fleets. 3 minor species have petitioned for immediate admission to mutual defense pacts with larger powers. They think we're coming for them? Eliza observed. They should, Marcus said quietly. Because they still don't understand what the Kresh did wrong. Tomorrow we start the real education. The display shifted to show footage from 4 years earlier. A Kresh battle fleet emerged from faster-than-light transit at the edge of Earth's solar system. The ships were massive, designed to inspire terror as much as fight battles. They looked like armored crescents, each one capable of reducing a planet to ash. Marcus had watched this recording hundreds of times, but it never failed to make his chest tighten. The Kresh had broadcast their intention with brutal clarity. Humanity was classified as a pre-council primitive species with no rights under galactic law. Earth possessed resources the Kresh required for their industrial expansion. Resistance would be met with total annihilation of the human population. They had given Earth 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Play our response. Marcus instructed. The hologram shifted to show Secretary General Amanda Price delivering Earth's reply from the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. Marcus remembered writing part of that speech, remembered the debates about whether they should try to negotiate or show strength. To the Kresh Dominion. Your demands are rejected. Leave our system immediately or face the consequences. 23 words. The Kresh had found it amusing enough to broadcast across their empire. A primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel, threatening a power that had conquered 12 sectors of space. They had laughed, then they had begun their invasion. Pull up the operational timeline, Marcus said. The hologram displayed a tactical map of what the Kresh called a war in what historians would later describe as humanity's most desperate gamble. By conventional measures, it was the most one-sided conflict in galactic history. Day 1. The Kresh fleet established orbital dominance over Earth within hours. Human defense platforms were destroyed. Every ship Earth launched was systematically eliminated. Planetary bombardment began on major population centers. Casualties: 400 million humans dead. Day 2. Kresh ground forces landed on 6 continents. Human military resistance was fierce but completely futile against their superior technology and numbers. Casualties: 200 million humans dead. Day 3. Earth's governments issued formal surrender. The Kresh refused, stating that humanity's defiance required an example be made for other species who might consider resistance. The bombardment intensified. Casualties: 300 million humans dead. Day 4. Something changed. Marcus watched as the timeline displayed what happened next. Kresh commanders reported minor equipment failures across their fleet. Nothing critical at first. Weapon systems momentarily offline. Navigation computers displaying incorrect coordinates. Communication arrays experiencing interference. Command assumed stress-related errors or the harsh environment of human space. Day 5. The glitches intensified. Kresh crew members began reporting psychological symptoms. Paranoia, insomnia, visual hallucinations of humans infiltrating their ships. Medical officers attributed it to combat stress from subjugating a resistant population. Day 6. 3 Kresh warships collided during routine formation flight. Investigation revealed navigation crews were operating under false sensor data, each ship receiving different position information. 2,000 Kresh casualties. Command ordered a full systems diagnostic across the fleet. Day 7. Panic spread through the Kresh military. Equipment failures became catastrophic. Life support systems fluctuated randomly. Weapons fired without authorization. A battlecruiser's reactor containment failed during routine operation, destroying the ship and 6 escort vessels in the resulting explosion. 40,000 Kresh dead. Day 8. The Kresh High Command ordered full retreat. They would return with additional forces to sterilize Earth completely, but first they needed to understand what was destroying their fleet. The faster-than-light drives activated. Every ship ended up in a different random location across the galaxy. Some materialized inside stellar coronas. Others appeared inside asteroid fields. Most simply vanished, their quantum signatures indicating dimensional dispersal that shouldn't be possible. Day 9 through 12. Every Kresh military installation in human-occupied space experienced simultaneous catastrophic failures. Orbital bases lost atmosphere. Planetary installations had their defense systems turn on them. Weapon stockpiles detonated. The Kresh attributed everything to human sabotage and vowed revenge. Day 30. The Kresh homeworld's planetary defense network activated without authorization. It targeted population centers. In 4 hours, 3 billion Kresh died before engineers could manually shut down the systems. Day 14. Kresh colonies began falling silent. No distress calls. No explanations. Investigative teams from neutral species discovered entire populations dead, infrastructure completely intact. No signs of conventional attack. Day 15. The Kresh Dominion's central government issued a galaxy-wide emergency broadcast. They claimed humanity deployed a weapon of unprecedented sophistication that could manipulate technology and biology across interstellar distances. They demanded Galactic Council intervention. Day 16. The Council dispatched observer vessels. They found exactly what the Kresh described. Worlds full of corpses. Technology mysteriously failing. Ships drifting with dead crews. Day 17. The last surviving Kresh fleet, comprising the Dominion's elite guard, launched a final desperate assault on Earth. Supreme Commander Velkresh himself led them, prepared to suicide crash their vessels into human cities if necessary. Day 18. The elite guard fleet arrived at Earth. Every ship, every crew member was found dead at their stations. No damage to the vessels. No signs of attack. Just silence. The hologram faded. Eliza broke the silence first. The Council thinks we deployed some kind of quantum-level superweapon. Technology that can manipulate electronics and biology simultaneously across interstellar distances? Do we have such a weapon? Marcus asked, though he knew the answer. Of course not, Eliza replied. That's not how we won? Marcus smiled grimly. Tomorrow, we begin explaining exactly how we won. And when we're done, the Council will understand why they should be grateful we chose the Kresh as our demonstration. Demonstration? Ortiz looked confused. For they officially made contact. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. That's impossible, Velkoff stated. Earth sensor technology at that time couldn't detect ships at such extreme ranges. Our own intelligence confirmed your technological limitations. You're absolutely correct, Marcus agreed. We couldn't detect their ships directly. We detected their communications instead. Specifically, we detected the subtle quantum fluctuations their encrypted transmissions created in local spacetime. Human theoretical physicists had predicted such signatures were mathematically possible. The Kresh's approach confirmed the theory and gave us something to track. You're saying you intercepted their military communications? Dalmor asked carefully. Better than that. We decrypted them. Marcus smiled at the shocked reactions. It took every quantum computer Earth possessed running continuously for 72 days, but we broke their encryption protocols. We broke them completely. And then we did something the Kresh never anticipated, something they didn't prepare for because it never occurred to them that primitives could accomplish it. He paused for effect. We listened. We learned. We understood them. The hologram displayed a vast web of Kresh communications, all translated into galactic standard language. The delegates leaned forward, reading the intercepted messages with growing comprehension and horror. Logistics reports, detailing fleet supply requirements and vulnerability windows. Personnel files showing crew assignments and psychological profiles. Technical specifications for weapon systems, including their limitations and failure points. But more importantly, personal communications between Kresh officers and their families. Psychological evaluations of fleet personnel identifying stress factors and weaknesses. Disciplinary reports revealing command structure fractures. Entertainment preferences showing cultural values. Medical records exposing biological vulnerabilities. By the time the Kresh fleet arrived at Earth, we knew everything about them, Eliza said, stepping forward to join Marcus. Not just their military capabilities, but who they were as individuals. We knew which officers were overconfident and likely to take unnecessary risks. Which crew members were anxious and would crack under pressure. Which ships had disciplinary problems that could be exploited. Which commanders had political rivalries that made cooperation difficult. You knew them, a Farani delegate observed, its crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed profound unease. You knew them better than they knew themselves. We knew them well enough to predict their responses to specific stimuli with 93% accuracy, Marcus confirmed. He displayed psychological profiles human analysts had constructed for senior Kresh commanders. They were disturbingly detailed, covering everything from tactical preferences to personal fears to predicted breaking points. Supreme Commander Velkresh, aggressive, glory-seeking, insecure about his position within Kresh hierarchy, prone to escalating commitments when challenged. Fears appearing weak before subordinates. Fleet Admiral Gorthex, cautious by nature, deeply superstitious according to Kresh cultural norms, excessively protective of his crew to the point of tactical rigidity, underlying health anxiety about his circulatory system. Operations Commander Helvac, brilliant tactical mind, pathologically arrogant, dismissive of subordinates' input, believes technology solves all problems, has history of ignoring warning signs until crisis occurs. You profiled every significant officer in their fleet, Representative Dalmore said, his voice carrying a note of something approaching horrified admiration. You built psychological models of thousands of individuals. We profiled everyone we could identify, Marcus confirmed. Every ship captain, every department head, every technical specialist, every individual whose decisions might affect the battle outcome. We built comprehensive models predicting how they would respond to various situations. What would make them confident? What would make them afraid? What would make them make mistakes? And then you attacked them psychologically before ever firing a weapon. Thrain concluded. Not immediately, Marcus corrected. First, we had to let them think they were winning. We had to let them believe their initial assessment was correct, that they were overwhelmingly superior, that human resistance was brave but ultimately futile. This created a specific psychological state in the Kresh military, overconfidence combined with contempt for their enemy. You sacrificed 1 billion of your own people just to create that psychological state? Velkoth's energy lattice flickered with what might have been incredulity or disgust. You allowed them to kill 1 billion humans as part of your strategy? Marcus's expression hardened, the first time he had shown strong emotion during the proceedings. The Kresh were going to kill us all regardless. We couldn't prevent those initial deaths through conventional military resistance. Our weapons were too primitive, our numbers too small. So yes, we absorbed their initial assault. We let them think victory was inevitable, while our actual strategy deployed in the background. Those 1 billion people died buying time for the strategy that would save the remaining 6 billion. What strategy? Several delegates demanded simultaneously. Day 4, Marcus said simply. When the glitches began, the hologram showed the first reports of equipment malfunctions in the Kresh fleet. Minor problems that seemed insignificant at first. Marcus overlaid this data with information showing simultaneous human cyber warfare operations penetrating Kresh networks. Humanity had 4 months to analyze every communication we intercepted from the Kresh. 4 months to identify vulnerabilities in their technology, weaknesses in their security protocols, backdoors in their systems. We couldn't match their ships in direct combat. We didn't need to. We just needed access to their networks, and their own communications gave us the blueprint for achieving that access. Cyber warfare, Dalmore breathed. You hacked their entire fleet. We did something more sophisticated than simple hacking, Marcus replied. We studied Kresh psychology extensively. They're a hierarchical species that values order, predictability, and technological reliability above almost everything else. System failures create profound anxiety in Kresh. psychology because they represent chaos, disrupting the natural order they believe should govern the universe. The display showed human cyber operations in meticulous detail, not crude attacks that destroyed systems, but surgical insertions of corrupted data designed to create specific psychological effects. Navigation computers received coordinate information offset by microscopic margins, barely noticeable but enough to create doubt. Weapon systems experienced random power fluctuations that disappeared before technicians could identify the cause. Life support systems registered false anomalies that vanished during diagnostic checks, making crews question their own perceptions. These weren't system failures, Marcus explained. They were carefully designed to create exactly one psychological effect in Kresh personnel: doubt. Doubt in their equipment, doubt in their technology, doubt in the reliability of the systems they depended on for survival in hostile space. And in Kresh psychology, doubt leads directly to paranoia. And paranoia leads to mistakes, Thrain observed quietly. Paranoia leads to cascading failures, Marcus corrected, which was our actual strategic objective. Look at Day 7. 3 Kresh warships collided during routine formation flight. The hologram showed the disaster in detail. 3 massive warships, each carrying thousands of crew members, crashing into each other at speeds that turned metal and flesh into debris clouds. This wasn't a navigation system failure, Marcus revealed. The navigation systems worked perfectly, providing accurate data. What failed was the human element, or in this case, the Kresh element. 3 ship captains, each receiving slightly different sensor data through our manipulation, each becoming increasingly paranoid about their position relative to other vessels, each making fear-driven corrections based on false information, each responding to what their compromised instruments told them rather than trusting their training or communicating effectively with nearby ships. You manipulated them into killing themselves, Velkoth stated flatly. We created conditions where their own psychology, their own fears, their own responses to perceived threats worked against them, Marcus replied. Everything that happened was the result of Kresh decisions, Kresh actions, Kresh psychological responses to situations we carefully constructed. We didn't kill those crew members. Their commanders did by making fear-driven choices instead of rational ones. The hologram advanced through the timeline, showing the escalating cascade of disasters throughout the Kresh military. Each incident was analyzed, revealing the same pattern repeating. Human cyber operations creating small anomalies. Kresh psychology amplifying those small problems into major crises. Kresh commanders making fear-driven decisions that led to catastrophic outcomes. The Kresh Homeworld Defense Network incident on Day 13, Marcus said, displaying detailed analysis. The network didn't malfunction. It responded exactly as designed to the data we fed it. The tragedy was that the invasion force coordinates we provided through our network access matched the locations of major Kresh civilian population centers. The defense network did what it was programmed to do: destroy the invasion force. It just didn't realize the invasion force coordinates were false. The chamber had fallen into heavy silence. Even the ambient sounds of various species' life support systems seemed muted. The delegates were beginning to understand not just what humanity did, but how completely they had dominated an enemy that should have crushed them easily. And the colonies? Dalmor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Entire populations dead without signs of conventional attack. How did you accomplish that? Marcus's expression became grave. That requires understanding biological components of our strategy. But the fundamental principle remains the same. We didn't directly kill those populations. We created conditions where their own biology, their own psychology, their own social structures killed them. Tomorrow I'll explain that process in detail. But for now, the Council needs to understand one crucial point. He looked directly at Velkoth's energy lattice. The Galactic Council asked if humanity possesses a superweapon. The answer is yes. But it's not a device you can detect or defend against conventionally. It's not technology you can match or counter with superior engineering. Our superweapon is understanding. We understand that every species, regardless of how advanced or powerful, is vulnerable to manipulation of its own perceptions, its own psychology, its own fundamental nature. You're describing yourselves as monsters, Thrain said quietly. We're describing ourselves as survivors, Marcus corrected firmly. The Kresh came to exterminate us. They gave us no choice except to fight with every capability we possessed. We fought smart instead of hard. We fought psychological warfare instead of conventional warfare. We won by being more sophisticated than our enemy expected or could defend against. He paused, then delivered his conclusion. Tomorrow, I'll explain the biological and social components of how we accomplished the simultaneous collapse of an entire interstellar civilization. I'll show you exactly how we turned the Kresh's own nature against them so completely that they effectively committed species-wide suicide while we barely touched them physically. And when I'm finished, the Council will understand why the Kresh's fate, as terrible as it appears, was actually the most merciful outcome possible given the situation humanity faced. He let his final words hang in the air. Because once you understand our complete methodology, you'll realize something terrifying. The Kresh weren't special. What we did to them, we could theoretically do to any species in this chamber, given sufficient motivation and preparation time. The only question is whether we'll ever be motivated to do so again. That sounds like a threat, a delegate accused. That's a statement of capability, Marcus replied calmly. Whether it becomes a threat depends entirely on whether any species makes the same mistake the Kresh made, assuming that humans are primitive, that our lack of conventional military power makes us weak, that attacking us would be easy or safe. He began gathering his materials, signaling the session's end. The Kresh learned too late that humanity doesn't fight wars by destroying enemy militaries. We fight wars by erasing the conditions that allow enemies to exist. Tomorrow I'll show you exactly what that means. And then the Council can make an informed decision about whether Earth deserves to exist or whether we represent a threat that requires elimination. As Marcus left the chamber, he noticed the fear had deepened in delegates' expressions. They were beginning to understand that conventional military superiority might be meaningless against an enemy that fought wars. Inside your own mind, using your own psychology as a weapon against you. Good. Fear would make them cautious. And caution might keep them from making the Kresh's fatal mistake, because humanity genuinely didn't want to erase other civilizations. But they would, without hesitation. If the alternative was extinction, the galaxy needed to understand that truth clearly before anyone else. Decided to test whether humans were bluffing. The council chamber operated under maximum security when Marcus returned for the third day of testimony. The revelation that humanity could manipulate enemy psychology so completely had triggered alarm across the galactic community. Several species requested permission to record the proceedings for their military intelligence divisions. All requests were denied. This knowledge was too dangerous to spread widely. Marcus noticed the seating arrangement had changed again. Delegates were no longer clustered by traditional political alliances. Instead, they had reorganized based on a new criterion, which species showed evidence of artificial genetic modifications in their populations the previous night. Following Marcus's presentation on psychological warfare, 17 species had requested emergency genetic screening. The results shocked everyone. Clear evidence of artificial modifications existed in 41 species, including several council founding members. Someone or something had been engineering galactic civilization at the genetic level for thousands of years. And now Marcus was about to explain how humanity had exploited similar modifications in Kresh biology to achieve their complete collapse. High Arbiter Velkoth materialized with unusual urgency. Ambassador Webb, before you begin, the Council demands clarification. You claim the Kresh were genetically modified. You further claim this modification made them vulnerable to your tactics. Explain immediately how genetic modification from thousands of years ago relates to a war fought 4 years ago. Marcus activated his holographic display. Instead of showing battlefields or technology, it displayed a Kresh biological specimen in molecular detail. To understand how we defeated the Kresh, you need to understand what the Kresh actually were. Not what they believed themselves to be, but what someone else made them. The hologram focused on specific genetic sequences, highlighting markers that glowed with artificial precision. When human xenobiologists analyzed Kresh corpses after the conflict, they found something unexpected. These genetic markers shouldn't exist in naturally evolved, silicon-based life forms. They're artificial. Precisely engineered modifications integrated into Kresh biology at the most fundamental level. Eliza stepped forward, her expertise as a xenanthropologist giving her authority on this topic. We dated these modifications using quantum decay analysis of the artificial genetic structures. They were inserted into the Kresh genome approximately 4,000 years ago, long before the Kresh developed spaceflight or even industrial civilization. Someone modified a pre-industrial species? Counselor Thrain's mandibles clicked in agitation. Why? To create a weapon, Marcus stated flatly. These modifications did 3 specific things. First, they enhanced Kresh aggressive tendencies, and territorial expansion drives far beyond what natural evolution would produce. Second, they reduced Kresh capacity for empathy toward other species while maintaining strong in-group loyalty. Third, they created psychological imperatives that made conquest feel natural and necessary. The hologram displayed comparative analysis between modified Kresh genetics and samples from closely related silicon-based species that evolved on nearby worlds. The differences were stark. Natural silicon-based species in the Kresh's stellar neighborhood evolved as cautious, slow-reproducing, territorial but not expansionist. The Kresh evolved into something completely different, aggressive, rapidly expanding, viewing other species as resources rather than fellow sentient beings. Who modified them? Velkoth demanded. We don't know, Marcus admitted. But we found communication intercepts suggesting the Kresh themselves didn't know they were modified. They believed their aggressive expansion was natural, that their drive to conquer was simply who they were as a species. He pulled up intercepted Kresh communications from 18 months before their attack on Earth. These transmissions show something disturbing. Kresh strategic planning began changing subtly about 2 years before they invaded Earth. Decisions that didn't quite align with their previous behavior patterns. Risk assessments that reached conclusions their own intelligence data didn't support. Strategic priorities that shifted without clear justification. Commander Ortiz added technical details. We analyzed the communication patterns and found something extraordinary. The Kresh were receiving transmissions from an unidentified source in Sector 447, a region of space the Galactic Council considers uninhabited. The transmissions used quantum signatures we'd never encountered, suggesting technology far beyond anything currently in use. You're suggesting someone was controlling the Kresh remotely? Dalmor asked carefully. Not controlling directly, but influencing, Marcus corrected. Shaping their perceptions, feeding them information that made certain conclusions seem obvious, manipulating their decision-making without them realizing it was happening. Every major strategic choice the Kresh made, including the decision to invade Earth, occurred within 72 hours of receiving one of these transmissions. The implications rippled through the chamber. If an unknown intelligence could manipulate species remotely through genetic modifications and targeted communications, then free will itself might be an illusion for the affected species. This is why we had to completely erase the Kresh, Marcus said, his voice carrying unusual weight. They weren't just an enemy. They were a weapon. A weapon pointed at humanity by something that wanted to observe our response. And if we'd left them intact after defeating them, that intelligence could have used them again, could have learned from their failure and optimized them, could have turned them into an even more dangerous threat. Eliza displayed new data, biological samples showing the progression of Kresh physiological changes during the 18-day war. But the genetic modifications had a second effect, One, we don't think the modifying intelligence fully understood. The modifications made the Kresh psychologically and biologically fragile in specific ways. The hologram showed Kresh neural architecture in detail. Kresh consciousness exists across distributed neural networks throughout their bodies. This makes them resistant to localized damage but vulnerable to systemic psychological stress. Their biology evolved this way naturally, but the artificial modifications amplified the vulnerability. The modifications that made them aggressive also made them dependent on social hierarchy and technological reliability, Marcus explained. Kresh psychology requires order. They need to believe their society functions according to predictable rules, that their technology works reliably, that their command structure maintains stability. When we induced equipment failures and created paranoia in their military, Eliza continued, we weren't just affecting those individual crews. Kresh biology includes quantum-entangled biological markers in their communication systems, an evolutionary adaptation for colony coordination. When their military experienced psychological stress, they released specific pheromones that transmitted through their communication networks. You spread their military's panic to their entire civilization, Thrain said slowly, horrified comprehension dawning. Through their own biology, we created a cascade effect, Marcus confirmed. As the military stress levels increased from our cyber warfare operations, those stress pheromones propagated through every Kresh communication network. Colony worlds began detecting the markers. Civilian populations started experiencing the same psychological symptoms their military felt: paranoia, equipment distrust, social order breakdown. The hologram displayed the timeline of Kresh colony collapses. The Kresh evolved on a world with periodic catastrophic environmental events. Their adaptation was a biological failsafe mechanism. When the species faces extinction-level threats, their biology shifts all resources to immediate survival of existing individuals. Reproduction shuts down. Social cooperation breaks down. Individual Kresh enter what human psychologists would call a dissociative survival state. You triggered their extinction response, a Ferrani delegate said. Its crystalline form refracting light in patterns suggesting deep disturbance. You made their biology believe the species was ending. Days 10 through 12, Eliza explained, displaying medical data from Kresh colonies. As their military installations failed catastrophically and stress pheromones reached critical concentrations across their communication networks. Every Kresh in their civilization received the same biological signal: extinction is imminent. Their bodies responded automatically to genetic programming 4,000 years old. The hologram showed the biological progression in gruesome detail. Kresh reproductive systems shut down completely. Metabolic processes shifted to pure survival mode, but the psychological component was worse. Kresh are hierarchical by nature, amplified by the artificial modifications. They require social order to maintain psychological stability. When that order collapsed due to military failures and widespread panic, they entered dissociative states. Their distributed neural networks began failing as stress hormones overwhelmed their systems. Within 72 hours of reaching critical stress levels, organ failure cascaded through entire populations, Marcus stated. They didn't die from external attack. They died because their own biology and psychology collapsed under conditions we carefully engineered. We turned their evolutionary adaptations and artificial modifications into weapons against them. The chamber sat in horrified silence. What Marcus described went beyond conventional warfare into something darker, more sophisticated, and more terrifying than any weapon system the Council had ever encountered. You committed xenocide through biological manipulation, Velkoth stated, its energy lattice pulsing with barely controlled agitation. You engineered the extinction of an entire species by exploiting their fundamental nature. We eliminated a threat that would have exterminated us, Marcus countered firmly. The Kresh gave us no alternative. They refused every offer to withdraw. They explicitly stated their intention to process our population into nutrients. They were going to kill 7 billion humans. We responded by using every capability we possessed to ensure they couldn't. But the methodology? Dalmor said quietly. The sophistication required to analyze alien biology so completely, identify psychological vulnerabilities, and engineer a species-wide collapse within 18 days. How did humanity accomplish this when you'd only known alien life existed for 70 years? Marcus smiled grimly. Because humans have been doing exactly this to each other for 10,000 years. Every technique we used against the Kresh, we first developed fighting ourselves. Psychological warfare, biological exploitation, social manipulation, information control. We perfected these capabilities through thousands of human conflicts before we ever encountered an alien species. He pulled up Earth's history again, focusing on examples the Council hadn't seen before. Biological warfare dating back thousands of years. Psychological operations during World War II that convinced entire populations to doubt their own governments. Cold War campaigns that manipulated adversaries into economic collapse. Modern information warfare that shaped entire societies' perceptions of reality. The Kresh were actually fortunate, Marcus said, his voice carrying cold certainty. We'd never deployed these capabilities against an alien species before. We were still learning their biology and psychology. If they had attacked Earth today, with what we've learned from studying them, the collapse would have taken 72 hours instead of 18 days. You're describing yourselves as if you're proud of this capability, Thrain said. Disgust evident in his voice. I'm describing reality, Marcus replied. Humanity didn't choose to develop these capabilities because we're cruel or evil. We developed them because our species spent 10 millennia fighting itself in increasingly sophisticated ways. By the time we reached the stars, we had become experts at the deadliest form of warfare, making enemies destroy themselves. Velkoth's energy lattice stabilized into a configuration suggesting difficult judgment. This council must determine whether such capabilities make humanity too dangerous to exist alongside other species. You've demonstrated you can analyze alien biology, identify vulnerabilities, and engineer complete civilizational collapse. What prevents you from doing this to every species that disagrees with you? The same thing that prevents humans from doing it to each other, despite having these capabilities for centuries, Marcus answered. Choice, ethics, the understanding that having the capability to do something doesn't make doing it right or necessary. We deployed these tactics against the Kresh because they left us no alternative. They attacked us with genocidal intent. They refused negotiation. They escalated when we tried to surrender. But you'll use these tactics again if threatened, a delegate stated. Yes, Marcus said simply. If another species attacks Earth with the intention of exterminating us, we will use every capability we possess to survive. Just as any species in this chamber would. The difference is our capabilities happen to be more sophisticated than most species expect. Commander Ortiz stepped forward with new data. But there's something else the Council needs to understand. The Kresh weren't just our enemy. They were a test. A probe sent by the intelligence that genetically modified them thousands of years ago. The hologram displayed transmission analysis showing the pattern of communications from Sector 447. This intelligence manipulated the Kresh into attacking Earth specifically. It wanted to see how humanity would respond, what capabilities we deploy, how we think strategically, whether we could identify manipulation. You're saying an unknown intelligence deliberately provoked a war to study humanity? Dalmor sounded incredulous. We're saying the evidence suggests exactly that, Marcus confirmed. And 72 hours ago, during our first day of testimony before this council, Earth received a new transmission from Sector 447, same quantum signature. Same encryption protocols? What did it say? Multiple delegates demanded. Marcus displayed the decrypted message. 3 words in Galactic Standard. Experiment continues. Adapt. The chamber erupted in chaos. The implications were staggering. If an unknown intelligence was conducting experiments on galactic civilization, manipulating species into conflicts to gather data, Then everything they thought they knew about interstellar politics might be false. This intelligence isn't deterred by our elimination of the creche, Marcus continued over the noise. It's learning from the data, which means the creche weren't the end of something. They were the beginning. And humanity's demonstration of capabilities wasn't a deterrent. It was providing exactly the information this intelligence wanted. What information? Velkoth demanded. How humans fight when facing extinction, Marcus replied. What psychological and biological tactics we deploy. How sophisticated our analysis capabilities are. What our ethical boundaries look like under extreme pressure. All valuable data for an intelligence that might be planning something? Larger, he pulled up the analysis showing 17 historical events across 300 years where similar manipulation patterns appeared in council records. Conflicts that didn't quite make sense. Civilizations that collapsed mysteriously. Aggressive species that rose rapidly then disappeared. This intelligence has been manipulating galactic civilization for centuries at minimum, possibly millennia, Eliza explained. The genetic modifications we found in 41 species aren't random. They serve specific purposes. Some species modified for aggression, others for resource extraction, some for intelligence gathering, and disturbingly, several founding council members show modifications that enhance diplomatic behavior and coalition building, while reducing capacity for independent strategic thinking. You're suggesting the council itself was engineered, Velkoth stated, its voice carrying a note of something that might have been existential dread. We're suggesting galactic civilization's current structure serves someone's purposes, Marcus replied carefully. Whether those purposes are benign or malevolent, we don't know. But the pattern exists, and humanity's war with the creche was part of that pattern. What do you want from us? Thrain asked bluntly. Tomorrow I'll present our final evidence and our recommendations, Marcus stated. Because this isn't just about whether Earth deserves council, membership, or whether our actions against the creche were justified. This is about whether galactic civilization can survive what's coming next. And I believe the only chance any of us have is if we work together instead of allowing this intelligence to pick us off one by one through manufactured conflicts. He began gathering his materials. The creche were a weapon pointed at humanity. But they were also a warning to everyone else. This intelligence can manipulate any species, can turn your own biology against you, can make you attack targets it selects for purposes you don't understand. The question isn't whether humanity is too dangerous to exist alongside you. The question is whether any of us can afford to fight each other while something else is pulling our strings. As the session ended, delegates filed out in disturbed silence. The nature of the threat had expanded beyond humanity's capabilities to something far more fundamental. If free will itself was compromised for genetically modified species, then galactic civilization might be nothing more than an elaborate experiment conducted by an intelligence they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and couldn't resist. Marcus watched them go, knowing he'd accomplished exactly what Earth needed. The Council was no longer focused on whether to punish humanity. They were focused on survival against a threat they hadn't known existed until humans revealed it. Tomorrow, he would offer Earth's expertise in counter-manipulation, psychological warfare, and biological analysis as tools for galactic defense. And in exchange, Earth would secure full Council membership and protection. The creche's extinction had purchased humanity's future among the stars. But more than that, it had revealed that the real war was just beginning. And this time, humanity wouldn't be fighting alone. They'd be teaching the entire galaxy how to fight enemies that attacked from inside, your own mind and biology. Because if anyone understood that kind of warfare, it was the species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting it against themselves. The question was whether the galaxy could learn fast enough to survive what was coming next. The final council session convened under circumstances unprecedented in galactic history. Genetic screening teams had confirmed artificial modifications in 41 species. Intelligence agencies had detected similar quantum transmission signatures in 17 regions of space previously considered uninhabited. The entire structure of galactic civilization was being questioned, and delegates looked to humanity for answers none of them wanted to hear. Marcus noticed immediately that the chamber's atmosphere had transformed completely. 4 days ago, these delegates wanted to judge humanity for erasing the creche. Now they looked at Earth as potential salvation from a threat they hadn't known existed. Fear had accomplished what diplomacy never could. It made humanity essential instead of expendable. High Arbiter Velkoth materialized without preamble. Ambassador Webb, 43 species just received simultaneous transmissions from the same quantum signature you identified. All species with red category genetic modifications, those modified for aggressive expansion. The transmissions contained identical messages. Marcus felt his blood run cold, even though he'd anticipated something like this. What did the messages say? Velkoth projected the decrypted text for all delegates to see. Primary protocol activated. Eliminate human contamination. All resources allocated. Victory ensures survival. Failure ensures termination. The chamber remained silent as the implications registered. 43 species, hundreds of thousands of warships, industrial capacity that dwarfed Earth's by orders of magnitude. All of them receiving orders to attack humanity simultaneously. When will they reach human space? Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the existential threat. First wave arrives at your border systems in 68 hours, Commander Ortiz reported. Having received updates from Earth's defensive forces, we're detecting mobilization across 43 separate military commands. They're not coordinating, just all independently preparing to attack. It's exactly what you'd expect from species receiving the same programmed imperative. Counselor Thrain's voice trembled. This intelligence is weaponizing half the galaxy's aggressive civilizations against humanity. Can Earth survive this? Marcus looked at the tactical display showing threat vectors converging on human space from multiple directions. By any conventional military analysis, it was hopeless. Earth would be overwhelmed in days, possibly hours. But then, humanity didn't fight conventional wars. I don't know if we can survive, Marcus admitted honestly. But I know we're not going to erase 43 civilizations to do it. That's not who we are. Instead, we're going to attempt something more difficult and more important. What? Multiple delegates asked simultaneously. We're going to free them, Marcus stated. We're going to break this intelligence's control over those species and give them back their free will. We're going to do in 68 hours what this intelligence spent thousands of years building. How? Velkoth demanded. Marcus activated his holographic display one final time. Instead of showing battles or threats, it displayed something unexpected, a comprehensive plan for galactic-scale psychological liberation. Over the past 3 days, Earth's strategic analysts have been working continuously on this exact scenario. We knew this intelligence would respond to being exposed. We predicted it would weaponize modified species against us. So we prepared. Ileza stepped forward, pulling up detailed biological and psychological profiles. We've analyzed all 43 species receiving attack orders. We've identified the specific genetic modifications driving their aggressive responses. And we've developed counter-manipulation protocols customized for each species' psychology. You can break genetic programming that's thousands of years old in 68 hours? Dalmore sounded skeptical. We can't break the programming, Marcus corrected. But we can override it. We can show these species that their attack imperative isn't their own choice, but an external command they're biologically compelled to obey. And once they understand they're being controlled, most sentient beings resist that control regardless of genetic predisposition. The hologram displayed the first stage of Earth's counter-operation. Phase 1. Communication. We broadcast to all 43 species simultaneously. We show them evidence of their genetic modifications. We reveal the transmission patterns from Sector 447. We demonstrate how their recent strategic decisions align with external manipulation rather than their own interests. They won't believe you, Thrain predicted. Species don't want to admit they lack free will. They will believe us because we'll use their own biology as proof, Eliza explained. We'll show them the stress pheromone patterns we detected in the creche. We'll demonstrate how the same patterns exist in their current military communications. We'll prove that what they think is their natural aggressive instinct is actually artificially induced biological compulsion. Phase 2, Psychological Disruption, Marcus continued. Once we've planted doubt in their certainty, we deploy targeted cyber operations similar to what we used against the creche, not to destroy them, but to demonstrate our capabilities. We show them that we could erase them if we wanted to, just like we erased the creche, but we don't want to. We want them to be free. The hologram showed simulated operations across 43 different species networks. We induce minor equipment failures, navigation anomalies, communication glitches. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make them doubt whether their military operations are under their own control or being manipulated by someone else. You're going to make them paranoid about whether they're being controlled, a Farani delegate observed, using their fear of manipulation to break existing manipulation. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. The same psychology that made the creche vulnerable can be used to free these species. We create doubt. Doubt leads to questioning. Questioning leads to examining evidence. Evidence proves they're being controlled. And once they see the control mechanism clearly, they can choose to resist it. Phase 3, Alliance Building, Commander Ortiz explained. We don't just show them they're controlled. We offer them freedom. We share our counter-manipulation technology. We help them identify and potentially reverse their genetic modifications. We demonstrate that humanity isn't their enemy, that the real enemy is the intelligence that's been using them as weapons for thousands of years. The hologram displayed communication templates customized for each species' psychology. Some emphasized logic and evidence. Others focused on emotional appeals to autonomy and self-determination. Each approach was designed specifically for the target species' cognitive patterns. Will this work? Velkoth asked bluntly. We estimate 60 to 70% effectiveness, Marcus replied honestly. Some species will reject the evidence. Some will be too deeply conditioned to override their programming. Some will attack us regardless because they can't accept that their entire civilization was manufactured. But if we can reach even 30 of the 43 species, if we can make them question their orders long enough to investigate, we might prevent the worst of the bloodshed. And the species you can't reach? Thrain asked quietly. Marcus's expression hardened. For those species, we've developed contingency protocols. We'll defend ourselves. But our defensive strategy won't be erasure-like with the creche. It will be containment. We'll disable their offensive capabilities, trap their fleets in positions where they can't threaten us, and give them time to break their programming while unable to cause harm. You're describing the largest psychological warfare operation in galactic history, Dalmor said, mixing with horror in his voice. Attempting to deprogram 43 different species simultaneously while they're actively attacking you? Yes, Marcus agreed simply. Because the alternative is either letting them exterminate humanity or exterminating them ourselves. Neither outcome is acceptable, so we're attempting the impossible instead. Velkoth's energy lattice pulsed through several configurations, suggesting complex processing. This council cannot officially support such operations, but neither can we condemn them. If you succeed, you'll have freed dozens of species from millennia of manipulation. If you fail, those species will likely destroy Earth. We understand the stakes, Marcus said quietly. But humanity isn't facing this alone, Eliza added. We're requesting that the Galactic Council commit resources to supporting our liberation operations. Species with blue category modifications, those enhanced for intelligence gathering and data analysis, can help us process information from 43 simultaneous operations. Species without modifications can provide diplomatic support, communicating with the manipulated species from positions of neutrality. Even species with green category modifications can help by maintaining galactic stability while we work. You're asking us to help you fight a war we barely understand against an enemy we can't see. Thrain observed. We're asking you to help us free civilizations from slavery they didn't know they were in, Marcus corrected. This isn't humanity's war. This is everyone's war? That intelligence has been manipulating galactic civilization for thousands of years. The Kresh were just one weapon. Those 43 species receiving attack orders right now are just the next phase. If we don't stop this pattern, if we don't break this intelligence's control, then none of us are truly free. The chamber filled with urgent discussions as delegates consulted with their home governments. The decision facing them was profound. Support humanity's unprecedented psychological warfare campaign or watch while Earth either fell or was forced to erase dozens of civilizations to survive, a Farani delegate spoke, its crystalline voice carrying unusual force. Our species shows no genetic modifications. We have observed galactic affairs for 6,000 years with increasing confusion about behavioral patterns we couldn't explain. Humanity has provided the explanation. We support Earth's operations and offer our data processing capabilities to assist. The endorsement from the Farani, known for analytical precision and political neutrality, shifted momentum. Species began pledging support. Not all of them, but enough. Within an hour, Marcus had commitments from 37 species to provide intelligence support, communication assistance, and diplomatic cover for Earth's operations. We need more than support, Marcus said as the pledges accumulated. We need the Council to commit to fundamental restructuring once this crisis resolves. The genetic modifications must be addressed. The transmission sources must be investigated. The entire framework of galactic civilization needs to be examined to identify other manipulation patterns we haven't yet detected. You're asking us to dismantle structures that have maintained galactic stability for millennia? Representative Kelvas argued. He represented the Harmonious Union, one of the green category species modified for diplomatic coalition building, based on crisis conditions and incomplete information. Before Marcus could respond, alarms sounded throughout the Council station. New transmissions had been detected. Quantum signatures matching those from Sector 447, but these weren't directed at attacking species, they were directed at 17 Council species. All with green category modifications. Ortiz displayed the decrypted messages. They were identical: resist structural changes, maintain current framework, additional resources allocated. The chamber exploded in chaos. The intelligence wasn't just weaponizing aggressive species. It was actively directing modified council members to oppose the very changes that would free galactic civilization from its control. This is your proof, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the noise, that intelligence is operating in real time. It's listening to these proceedings. It's directing modified species to resist exactly the changes that would expose its influence. If anyone needed evidence that galactic civilization is being actively controlled, you just received it. Kelvas looked stricken, staring at the message his species had received. We didn't choose this. We didn't know we were being manipulated into maintaining structures that serve someone else's purposes. Of course you didn't know, Marcus said gently. That's the nature of sophisticated manipulation. You think you're making rational choices based on genuine beliefs. You don't feel controlled. But your genetic predispositions, engineered thousands of years ago, make certain choices feel natural while other choices feel wrong or dangerous. Velkoth's energy lattice stabilized into a configuration of resolved determination. The evidence is conclusive. Ambassador Webb, your proposals are accepted with modifications. Genetic screening is mandatory for all council species. Your liberation operations receive full council support. Communication network upgrades are prioritized. And Earth is granted provisional council membership, with full membership confirmed after successfully managing this crisis. One condition, Velkoth added. humanity must also submit to genetic screening. If modifications are found, you undergo reversal therapy like everyone else. Agreed, Marcus said immediately. We want to know if we're compromised. But we need to start operations immediately. We have 63 hours before attacking fleets reach human space. Authorized, Velkoth confirmed. All Council resources are at your disposal. But understand, Ambassador Webb, if your liberation operations fail, if those 43 species attack Earth with full force, this Council cannot protect you. You'll face that threat alone. We understand, Marcus replied. But we won't be alone. Because every species supporting our operations has just committed to fighting this intelligence's influence. That's more alliance than humanity's ever had. As the session ended and delegates rushed to coordinate the unprecedented operation, Marcus felt the weight of what they were attempting. 63 hours to break genetic programming in dozens of species. 63 hours to prove that psychological liberation was possible on a galactic scale. 63 hours to either save humanity or watch Earth burn. Commander Ortiz approached as the chamber emptied. Can we really do this? Free 43 civilizations while they're attacking us. I don't know, Marcus admitted honestly. But the alternative is erasing them like we erased the creche, and if we do that, if we exterminate dozens of species just to survive, then we become exactly what that intelligence probably wants us to become, the monster that proves humanity needs to be controlled or eliminated. What if they can't be freed? Eliza asked quietly. Marcus pulled up a classified file on his data terminal. Protocols developed by Earth's Strategic Command for worst-case scenarios. Options that terrified him but might be necessary if liberation failed. Then we implement contingency plans that ensure humanity survives while minimizing casualties on all sides, he said. We've developed non-lethal containment strategies that trap attacking fleets without destroying them. We've prepared psychological weapons that induce temporary shutdown in hostile species without permanent damage. We've created options between surrender and genocide. And if those options fail? Ortiz pressed. Marcus closed the file without answering directly. Instead, he pulled up a display showing Earth. Billions of humans living ordinary lives, unaware that in 63 hours, 43 alien civilizations would arrive with genetically programmed orders to erase them. If those options fail, then we make absolutely certain that whatever intelligence is manipulating galactic civilization understands one thing perfectly. You can destroy humanity, but you cannot control us. You can engineer other species, but we will always expose you. You can manipulate civilizations, but we will always resist. And if you force us to fight for survival, we don't just defeat enemies. We transform the entire battlefield. He looked at his team. Now, let's get to work. We have 63 hours to free 43 civilizations. Expose a hidden intelligence that's been controlling galactic affairs for millennia, and prove that humanity deserves to exist among the stars. No pressure. As Earth's delegation dispersed to coordinate the operation, Marcus allowed himself one moment of reflection. 4 days ago, humanity stood accused of genocide. Now they were leading the largest liberation operation in galactic history. The creche's erasure had been terrible but necessary. Now humanity had the chance to show the galaxy that erasure wasn't their only capability. They could free species from slavery. They could expose manipulation. They could fight wars not by destroying enemies, but by transforming them into allies. That was what made humanity different. Not their capacity for destruction, but their commitment to finding better options even in impossible situations. In 63 hours. The galaxy would discover whether that commitment was naive idealism or humanity's greatest strength. Marcus suspected it was both. And that contradiction, that refusal to accept that destruction was the only answer even when facing extinction, might be exactly what galactic civilization needed to survive what was coming, because somewhere in Sector 447, an intelligence that had manipulated civilizations for thousands of years was watching. And it had just learned that humanity wouldn't play by the rules it had established. Humans would change the game entirely. The real war was beginning. Not a war of ships and weapons, but a war of wills. A war to determine whether galactic civilization would remain enslaved to ancient manipulation or break, free into genuine self-determination. In humanity. The species everyone thought was too primitive to matter was leading that fight. Not because they were stronger or more advanced, but because 10,000 years of fighting themselves had taught them something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Freedom wasn't given. It was taken. And sometimes you had to fight the hardest battles inside minds rather than in space. But those were the battles that mattered most. Because those were the battles that determined who you became. Earth had chosen to become liberators rather than conquerors. Now they just had to survive long enough to prove that choice was possible. The countdown began. 63 Trithis response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continue to nudge Claude along. Continue, Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.